Welcome to the pre-application technical assistance webinar. We'll take a minute here to let everyone jump on. Good morning and welcome. Okay, so let's get started. So first, I'm Courtney D'Angelo, the Senior Implementation Consultant on the Innovation Fund at ECIC, and I have the pleasure of kicking off our time together this morning. We want to first start by saying thank you for your time this morning. We look forward to spending it together, sharing more about the competitive funding opportunity, as well as answering your questions. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. The first is that translated closed captions are available for this webinar. So if translated captions would be helpful to you, you can access them by going to the bottom of your Zoom bar and clicking the More button. It has 3 dots over it. You click that, and then the first option should be titled Captions. Click that, and then click the switch that says Translation, and then choose your preferred language for the translation. To modify caption size or color for easier readability, click the captions again, and then this time click caption settings to adjust to whatever feels comfortable for you. Okay, so today's webinar is scheduled for up to 2 hours. We know 2 hours is a good chunk of time, and we are hopeful we may be able to wrap up before then, but we do have a lot of content to get through, and we want to be thoughtful in order to answer all of your questions. So thank you for being with us this morning. If you do have to step away or have to jump off early, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all attendees afterwards, along with the slides. So to ensure that we get through everything efficiently, all participants have been muted and will stay muted throughout the webinar. Please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom bar to submit questions throughout the presentation. We have frequent pauses built into our slide deck to answer questions submitted through the Q&A. As a participant, you can actually see the questions submitted, so you can upvote them if there's a question that you also have or are interested in knowing the answer to, so we can prioritize if we need to for time. All right, so a little bit of our agenda for our time together today. We're going to start with an introduction to the Innovation Fund as well as the Regional Child Care Coalition project. Then we'll move into the details of the competitive funding opportunity, sharing requirements of the funding, etc. Then we'll dive into the application and review process, where we'll walk through each application question and share the scoring rubric, as well as demo our new application portal. So today's webinar is truly a team effort. There's going to be a bunch of speakers today, which is awesome. So I want to introduce everyone from ECIC. We will hear from the Innovation Fund Senior Director, Joan Blau, the Innovation Fund Project Manager, Misty Conley-Rogers. And from ECIC's compliance team, we have Andrea Ayotte, our Program Grants Manager, as well as Kelly Kreider, Director of Program Compliance and Grants Administration. Additionally, we're excited to have other Regional Child Care Coalition strategic partners join us later in the webinar, and we'll introduce them when it is their time. So we've identified 5 key learning objectives to guide today's webinar. We want to take you through these so that we can just ground ourselves in what we hope you'll be able to walk away with post-webinar. The first one is to summarize the purpose and goals of the Regional Child Care Coalition project. We are using RCC as the abbreviation. Be able to determine your organization's eligibility for the funding opportunity. Third is to describe the application review and selection process. Use the online application portal, which is Flux, to submit an application. And then finally, to choose the TA opportunity best fit for your needs post this webinar and before the application ends. So jumping in right into that second learning objective, talking about eligibility, we want to start by sharing eligibility for this funding opportunity right at the top so that everyone's on the same page. So applications for this funding opportunity must be led or co-led by an economic development organization. Therefore, this opportunity will not be awarded to individual licensed childcare providers or businesses. However, if you are a childcare provider or business on this call today, there is an important role for childcare businesses and providers to play as members of regional coalitions. The importance of membership is to inform the coalition work by providing the perspective of a childcare business in their region. So if you are a childcare provider or business who would like to be involved in the regional coalition work, please check back to ECIC's website in March, where the leads of each region will be announced and contact information will be shared. And you can, of course, reach out to join as a member then. You're also welcome to listen today to the opportunity to learn more about the project. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit to introduce the Child Care Innovation Fund and who we are. So the fund was created in 2021 with the purpose of reimagining the childcare system in Michigan through common sense cross-sector solutions. Since 2021, the fund has invested in piloting and scaling innovations designed to benefit working families, employers, childcare business owners, and early educators. As of the end of fiscal year 24, so as of the end of September 2024, the fund has granted a total of $13.5 million through 94 unique grants, reaching all 83 counties in Michigan. So if you're interested in learning more about the work and impact of the Innovation Fund, we have a cool new impact report that we would love you to check out. The link is being dropped in the chat. So if you'd like to check that out later, we would love that. So the Child Care Innovation Fund focuses on funding initiatives that work toward the 5 funding outcomes and priorities. The first is to create synergy between economic development and childcare sectors, which we will be talking a lot about today with the Regional Coalition Project. Second is to improve compensation and on-the-job supports for early educators, build supply of childcare, collaborate with employers, and strengthen childcare businesses, all while centering equity throughout all of these priorities and outcomes. The Regional Child Care Coalition Project is a systems change initiative that truly works to move each of these outcomes and priorities forward. And we look forward to sharing more with you today. We want to pause just to see if there's any questions we can answer right now before I hand it over to Joan.
There are no questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Misty. All right, Joan, I can hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to have the opportunity to be with you today. When we were able to begin the regional coalition work under Caring for My Future, of course, we didn't know that we would have funding beyond the planning period. But because of the tremendous work that was led by economic development organizations and early childhood organizations, municipalities, and coalition members throughout Michigan, MyLeap determined that it would be important to continue to fund the work. So we're going to drop into the chat our information about our regional coalition summary report that was completed at the end of December. If you haven't been previously involved in the regional coalition work and you're just becoming interested in being involved, it'd be really important to review the report. And we'll also be hosting a webinar next week, which we'll talk about more later in the webinar. And it would be a great opportunity to join and learn more. So why do we think the regional coalition work is important? As Courtney mentioned, what we're trying to do in creating synergy between economic development and the early childhood system is really systems change work. It's an important opportunity to recognize that the early care and education sector in Michigan and really in any state is not able to solve all of the problems that we have related to childcare all on its own. And in fact, there's a necessity to do many things in combination with other sectors to build more childcare facilities, to make progress on the issues associated with compensation, to support the increase in quality in childcare. And all those things work together to ensure that we have a healthy and vital childcare sector and industry. We like to talk about childcare as being an essential part of employment infrastructure. Over 60% of families have both parents in the workforce. And so for parents to be able to go to work, there's got to be childcare available. And we know that people work in all kinds of settings, many different shifts. You might also work on the weekend. And so we don't just need childcare available 9 to 5. We need childcare that can really fit with people's needs and preferences. And by investing in childcare infrastructure, we can support Michigan's economic growth and vitality. We know that a strong childcare sector has been essential to Michigan's economic recovery, and we're certainly heading into a new period here in Michigan where we have opportunity for future growth. And one of the things that I think is really important about childcare is the benefits that it provides to children, to working families, to employers, to childcare businesses, and to communities. It's a rare strategy that we see in systems change work that can benefit so many different stakeholders simultaneously. And so childcare is really powerful if you're trying to make change. And really this regional coalition investment that MyLeap is making, both in ECIC, that's allowing ECIC's Child Care Innovation Fund to invest over the next 5 years, at least. It's really an unprecedented opportunity in our state to design, finance, and build childcare facilities and workforce to meet the needs of working families and their employers in your region. Next slide. I want to just say upfront a little bit about the available funds and the payment schedule. So for this particular period of performance, applicants may propose budgets of up to $100,000 for the initial 6-month period of performance. The funds that are going to be available in subsequent years and for subsequent periods of performance are going to be determined by Michigan's annual legislative appropriation to MyLeap. In terms of our payment schedule, payments are going to be provided on a reimbursement basis for actual expenditures that are incurred during the award period. And we anticipate a monthly submission of a statement of expenditures, which we will then reimburse. Next slide. The Innovation Fund, as you heard from Courtney this morning, really thinks a lot about how are we funding for statewide impact. And we've got, with this particular funding opportunity, we are really linking the funding of regional coalitions to the MEDC Economic Development Collaborative Regions. You can see on the screen that there are 10 MEDC regions, and we would be looking to fund one coalition in each of the MEDC regions. Regional childcare coalitions must be led or co-led by an economic development organization. And I'll be talking more about what it means to be a lead or a co-lead here in just a moment. So this is a change from the Caring for My Future effort, where we were really starting to build a partnership with economic development organizations. And one of the things that we learned from that and that MyLeap came to understand is how critically important it is for economic development organizations to really be in the lead or the co-lead of these efforts, because we're not just trying to make work happen in the early care and education sector. We're really trying to take advantage of all of the resources and expertise and opportunities that are available specifically in Michigan's economic development sector. So we thought it would be helpful to just provide a basic overview of what we mean when we talk about the role of the regional coalition lead and the regional coalition co-lead. So I'm going to focus first on the regional coalition lead. This is going to be the organization that's going to sign the contract with ECIC. Once they're successful and approved for funding. This organization will serve as the fiduciary. They'll be developing the budget narrative, and they're going to be accountable for reporting on spending. These are federal CCDF block grant dollars, and they do come with requirements for the use of these funds. The lead organization is ultimately accountable to the Early Childhood Investment Corporation Child Care Innovation Fund for the successful implementation of the scope of work, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. And that includes working on the required metrics and the completion of timely required written reports. Very familiar for anyone that has actually worked on using federal funding. The lead will also be accountable for attendance at our technical assistance sessions, and those will include an individual orientation session with each of the 10 coalitions that will ultimately be selected. It will include attendance at our monthly peer learning community of practice. And then it will also include coming to and being prepared for and participating in the bi-monthly progress meetings. Ultimately, the co-lead is responsible also for assigning qualified personnel, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about the application questions and the budget. The co-lead has a slightly different role, and I'm going to focus on that next. They're consulted by the lead in the development of the budget and the budget narrative. They're informed about how the funds are going to be used by the lead and help to make sure that they align with federal fund requirements for the use of these funds. They're signing up as a co-lead to help to be a significant part of the implementation of the scope of work, including the metrics and the reporting, and then really being a partner with the lead in incorporating the knowledge and resources gained from ECIC's technical assistance work. So what we saw under Caring for My Future with the regional child care planning coalitions is we had both economic development organizations as leads, and early childhood organizations as leads or co-leads. There wasn't one way that we would say, oh, this is the way you have to do it. What's really important is that you've got the right organizations involved in taking on these roles, and that they're really prepared to carry out the full nature of the role of the lead and the co-lead. Next slide, please. The scope of work. So MyLeap has determined the scope of work for the regional child care coalitions, and then it is the Child Care Innovation Fund's role to really support the selected regional coalitions in the achievement of this scope of work. As I stated before, the initial period of performance for this grant is 6 months. So obviously, some of the things on this scope of work are not going to be fully realized in the initial 6 months. They're going to be started in this 6-month period. Progress is going to be made, but work will extend into a second year, a third year, fourth and fifth year. So this is a 5-year initiative that ECIC is engaged in with MyLeap. And so therefore it will be depending on available funding from the legislature, et cetera, our hope would be to work with regional coalitions for the full 5 years. So let me talk briefly about the scope of work. So first and foremost, supporting the region's childcare business owners and nonprofits. And this can look a variety of ways. One of the things that we learned under Caring for My Future is that economic development organizations do provide a lot of supports to businesses And they are starting to do some really interesting things to support childcare business owners in their communities. Ultimately, we want the work of the regional coalitions to be collaborative and to be helping to increase access to full day, full year childcare. The state has a particular interest in expanding access to infant and toddler childcare. We know that there's a large investment that's being made by MyLeap into expanding access to universal pre-K for children who are 4 years old. There's some piloting happening for 3-year-olds. We know that we haven't had a specific focus on infants and toddlers and the expansion of infant and toddler childcare. So one of the things that this initiative will be focusing on is both that overall increase in access, but assuring that there's targeted efforts to support infants and toddlers. The third aspect of the scope of work is working with others to address the early childhood workforce gap in the region. One of the things we learned from all of the planning action plans that were developed by regional coalitions is that there is a workforce gap throughout the state. And we're excited for the opportunity to work with regional coalitions around collaborative strategies to address the workforce gap. And those could include things like wage supplements, increasing access to benefits, and making connections between childcare employers and workforce supports like our early care and education registered apprenticeship programs that are now available to childcare employers in Michigan. A key aspect of the work from the inception of the regional coalitions, both in the planning process and also going forward, is their responsibility to ensure family choice and voice in childcare supply building. We know that parents are the predominant customer and consumer of childcare. They're the individuals who are making the selection, and they have very specific needs based on their employment. And so we want to make sure that throughout the state, as public funds are being used to expand childcare supply, that families are directly involved in helping to make the decisions about what supply is expanded and how funds are used, so that the supply that's developed is a match between family needs and preferences and the funding that's put forth. We've seen in the planning period with regional coalitions that they have convening power. And one of the things that we know is challenging across Michigan is families navigating existing childcare and pre-K resources and supports. We often hear that while there's a lot of information out there, families aren't sure where to go to find their way to childcare supports or pre-K supports. And so one of the things that we will begin working on in this initial period of performance is what does it look like to improve the coordination alignment between existing childcare and pre-K resources in the regions? And how can we make those childcare and pre-K resources work better for the primary customer, which is parents of young children? And finally, we know from the work in the planning that we did that employers are being severely affected by childcare shortages throughout the state. We've got some initiatives underway like TriShare or DuoShare up in northern Michigan, where we're starting to see cost sharing emerging between employers and families in the state of Michigan. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that all employers who have employees who are potentially eligible for TriShare know about it, understand how they could get involved in it, and also can get resources that will help them understand what are the other things that they might be able to do for their employees beyond cost sharing that would help to make sure that everyone has access, that employers have there's access in the region to support employers and to support their employees. Next slide. So just an overall timeline for this initial year, you can see over in the left-hand corner, we're in the pre-award process. So the application has been opened, you're participating in this webinar, the application will remain open until the end of January. Then we're going to move into the grant review and selection process, and that will take place between February and March. We'll be talking more about the grant review and selection process later in this webinar. Then the initial period of performance will be between March and September. These funds will all have to be liquidated. The funds that are provided in the initial period of performance will have to be liquidated by the end of September. You can see that what we intend is that in April, we'll have those individual orientation sessions, and then we'll have 2 bi-monthly progress meetings during the initial period of performance. We are currently working to prepare technical assistance resources for the monthly learning communities that will begin starting in April. Each month, the learning community will convene and it will bring information to the lead and the co-lead organizations that they need to be able to effectively implement their scope of work, take advantage of maybe upcoming funding opportunities, make connections to state or national organizations that can help you move your work forward. And throughout that period, we'll be disseminating communications and technical assistance resources also for families. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about membership. This is also something that MyLeap has specified, and we've had, based on the planning period, a few adjustments that have been made in the membership of regional coalitions. We've also already talked a couple of times about the importance of an EDO as a lead or a co-lead. No applications will be funded that don't have an economic development organization as a lead or co-lead. Additional required members are local government staff members with zoning knowledge and expertise, because there is remains work to be done to align local zoning and land use with expansion of childcare in most communities. We made really great progress on the planning period, but there is more to do. Each regional coalition will also include individuals representing the childcare sector, including childcare programs which are licensed by the state of Michigan, or tribal programs. If you are an organization that's interested in being a lead or a co-lead and you're in a region of the state that has tribal organizations, we'd strongly encourage you to use your existing relationships or use this as an opportunity to partner to bring the benefit of the Child Care Coalition to tribal communities. All coalitions have to include parents of young children with expertise in seeking and using high quality childcare for children from birth to age 12. Coalitions will also need to include the Intermediate School District or ESA or RESA early childhood lead from the MEDC region, the Great Start Collaborative directors from that MEDC region, the Great Start Family Liaisons, the Great Start to Quality Resource Center directors from the MEDC region, and the TriShare hub leads from the MEDC region. The purpose of requiring these members is not because they haven't maybe participated in the planning period. Many of the TriShare hub leads and resource center directors and collaborative directors, et cetera, were a part of the planning. But we know how critically important it is for us to bring together all the early childhood system building infrastructure. And so we want to have alignment between these other efforts and the regional coalition work going forward. I'm going to talk just briefly about performance metrics. So we will be funding coalitions to work on improvement from baseline on the metrics below. So we'll be looking together at infant and toddler childcare license capacity in the region. What does that look like in April? What does that look like in September of 2025? We don't have specific numbers or targets that we're setting in this initial period of performance, that's something that we'll all be thinking and working on together to think about in subsequent years. Should we, can we, does it make sense to set targets? In the source there, you'll see it says MSU Maps. MyLeap is working closely with Michigan State University in the development of some unique maps that will be accessible and available for regional coalitions and others related to childcare supply. And we'll be sharing more about those maps with the funded regions in the spring. We'll be looking for each region to be monitoring how many community-based organizations are involved in the implementation of Pre-K for All in the region. We know that that is been something that is really important in the expansion of Pre-K for All. We know there's an opportunity to continue to build the capacity of community-based organizations so that families really can have a choice and voice in where their children receive their pre-K education. And in fact, the Child Care Innovation Fund will be participating with MyLeap in the planning of and implementation of a home-based pre-K pilot in the coming years. So another metric is going to be full day, full year care license capacity in the region. Again, that's something you'll be able to find out from this Michigan State maps. We'll be looking at what is the number of businesses participating in TriShare in the region. And through the efforts of the regional coalition and others, we want to see the number of employers increasing. We also want to make sure that we've got a good number of childcare providers who are able to participate in TriShare, to see it as a benefit to their business. And so the TriShare lead will be able to bring this information to the regional coalition. We'll be looking at ensuring that regional coalitions maintain and or expand their parent members over time. And that's something that we'll track through the submission of your coalition roster, which we'll be talking more about later. And then we'll be looking at the number of parents who are engaged in regional coalition activities outside of meetings, and then looking at parent attendance at our National Center Learning Opportunities, which you're going to hear more about in a moment. One of the entities that the Child Care Innovation Fund is collaborating with to carry out this initiative is the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership, which is located here at ECIC and is funded by the Pritzker Children's Initiative. And the National Center will be talking more in this webinar about the specific work they'll be doing, but essentially we're going to be bringing the resources of the National Center to the regional coalition work here in Michigan. There are a couple more metrics that would be addressing in your narrative reporting, and I'll just touch on them briefly. When I was reviewing the scope of work, I talked about how one of the things the regional coalition will be doing is helping to support alignment and coordination between childcare and pre-K navigation resources. That will be something that we'll be asking you to report on through some narrative reporting. And then we'll also be looking to understand how is it going with convening and engaging your coalition members and community partners, moving forward the strategies and activities that you'll be putting forth in your project plan. And then, what does it look like in your region? What are those unmet needs and gaps that despite the planning work, despite the work that you'll be doing potentially as a funded applicant here going forward, what are those needs and gaps that still need to be addressed? Because the goal of the regional coalition work is to continue to surface what those are and to work together in partnership to bring those up to the state of Michigan, and for all of us to be looking together at how we can continue to move policy, practice, funding, regulatory reform to better meet the needs of working families throughout Michigan. Next slide. Progress reporting, I've mentioned this just to highlight it again. There are bi-monthly progress meetings that are required for organizations that are funded. The lead, and ideally the co-lead would both participate in these, but the lead is required to participate. And then we'll be doing this narrative and metrics reporting. ECIC really believes strongly how important it is to work in partnership with all of you. So we'll be making templates for these reports, and we'll be providing assistance to make sure that everyone is successfully able to complete them. Just to be very clear again on the application timeline, as you know, the application is open. It will close at 5 p.m. on January 31st. We will review applications in February and March. MyLeap ultimately makes the final decisions and approval of who the 10 regional coalitions will be. And then that initial period of performance we anticipate will run from March to September. And that was a lot of information. And so there certainly may be some questions.
So we do have one question in the Q&A. Emily asks, is having a co-lead a requirement of the RFP?
It is not, though you will see when we get to reviewing the questions, the application questions, that there are questions that both the lead and the co-lead would have to respond to. And so a stronger application would include a lead and a co-lead, I believe, in terms of meeting the highest scores for the rubrics that we have for the questions. So I think, Emily, if you have more questions about that and want to get underneath like why you wouldn't want to have a co-lead, et cetera, you'll be hearing soon about how to schedule office hours. And I would highly recommend that you schedule some office hours so we can kind of dig into your question further.
Thanks, Joan. That's the only unanswered question in the Q&A. If others have questions, please feel free to enter them throughout the webinar. We'll be sure to answer them. Thanks.
All right, so you've been hearing me talk a lot about partnership, and it really is a hallmark of the work of the Child Care Innovation Fund, and it was just a critical factor in the success of the Regional Child Care Planning Coalitions, and we want to bring partnership work forward to these coalitions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to work in partnership with ECIC. We all may have a lot of ideas about what that looks like, but we want to give some, sort of meat on the bones to that. So a key element of the regional coalition work is the inclusion of parents. And so related to that, what does that mean for applicants, for particularly the lead? One, your budget needs to include parent leader compensation. We have resources that we can share with you. Again, we're happy to schedule time with you to review what our best practices are for parent leader compensation. So many resources available, but every budget needs to include parent leader compensation for this initial period of performance. One of the things that we want to be true for our lead and co-lead organizations is that we're helping you to, where needed, grow your internal organizational capacity to welcome parents to your table and to engage them as full and equal partners in the work of your coalition and your scope of work. And then we also want you and encourage you, and will continue to do so, to take advantage of the opportunities that we're going to be making available to you, that you'll hear more about in just a moment, about resources that we're going to bring directly to regions for parent leadership development, so that we're able to build a cadre of parent and family leaders throughout Michigan that can help us to support that policymaker education that needs to take place so that we continue to support systems change. And you've heard me say ECIC is going to stand by your side with these things. We've got expertise through the National Center and ECIC's longstanding commitment to growing parent leadership and voice in our early childhood work in Michigan. The coalition also has to include individuals representing the childcare sector. We can't really be meeting to take steps to improve access to childcare if we're not learning from and taking advantage of the incredible expertise that's available to us through childcare business owners and providers across our state of Michigan, whether we're talking about a childcare center, a home-based childcare home, or a family group home, or license exempt childcare. We know there's incredible expertise and commitment to serving children and families in our communities throughout Michigan. So all regional coalition budgets should include funding to support the attendance and participation of childcare business owners, providers in the regional coalition work. These folks are stepping away from their businesses or their work to come to the meeting and provide expertise. And so therefore, we believe they need to be compensated for that in a manner that acknowledges the expert consultation that they're providing. And ECIC is available and prepared to talk with any potential applicant, and then subsequent to the work that we're going to be doing going forward with funded applicants around how do we really engage and learn from and co-lead with individuals representing the childcare sector. Next slide. Additional ways that we will work in partnership are related to the coalition carrying out the scope of work. You've heard me say how critically important it is to engage in our monthly learning community. We hope all regional coalitions will develop new partnerships, that you're going to take the regional childcare action plan that was created in the planning period and implement it and continue to make it better as all plans improve or need to be adapted over time, because our shared goal is to expand access to quality, affordable childcare for working families in all MEDC regions of Michigan. So what will we do? We'll make sure that we're providing you with a high quality professional learning experience every single month, and we'll be asking regularly for your feedback on that. We'll be working together to make sure this is a valuable use of your time and your staff's time. We're going to provide you with templates and resources for anything that we require you to do to receive these funds. And we're here to provide consultation and, if needed, coaching to help ensure that the work of the regional coalition is able to proceed and that implementation can move forward effectively. Because these are federal dollars and are a part of Michigan's Child Care Development Block Grant, which is the most significant source of funding that Michigan currently has to support childcare, it is critically important that anything that happens in the region with these dollars complies with state and federal requirements. Fundamentally, this is about the lead preparing and submitting accurate and timely reports on progress, and participating in the progress meetings, and spending, submitting your SOEs, timely, addressing issues that might arise in implementation. Overall, we want to make sure that by following federal guidelines, and staying timely with reporting and progress, we are able to continue to make the case with the Michigan legislature of the importance of funding this initiative, not just for an initial 5 years, but this contract includes the opportunity for ECIC Child Care Innovation Fund to advocate for subsequent years of funding for up to 5 additional years. So we will need to make the case for regional coalition funds to continue to potentially expand. And that will be work that we will need to do together. And through the reporting that you do and being timely with that, you help us to be able to do that very effectively with the department and in partnership with you with the legislature. So we know at the Child Care Innovation Fund that we can't do it alone. We're humble learners in this work to build the childcare industry. And so we've identified some strategic partners that we will be engaging with and bringing to you to engage with you as well, to help to make sure that we're all able to have the resources that we need to be successful. And so I'm very pleased and excited to introduce strategic partners that are going to talk to you just a little bit today about what it is that they're going to be able to provide as a part of the work that we'll be doing, all of us together in partnership. So from ECIC, we have Sarah Zybert, who's the program manager for the Center for Family and Parent Leadership. That's at ECIC. So welcome, Sarah. From Pulse at the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research, we have the co-executive directors, Maria Ortiz-Borden and Kathy Senza Wilson, who'll be talking to you today about the incredible work that Pulse will be doing in partnership with the Child Care Innovation Fund. And then finally, we have the owner, principal associate from Weaving Change LLC, Aaron Watson, who is leading our evaluation of this initiative and is going to be an incredibly important partner to all of us as we move forward with implementation. And I am going to turn it over to Sarah to kick us off here. I think we can move past this slide. Yep, there you go.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. As Joan said, my name is Sarah Zybert. I come from a background of family and parent leadership here in Michigan, and for the past decade have had the honor and pleasure of working both as a family leader and now in my role with the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership. What that means for you is support as you work to engage with families to inform your regional coalition work. And some of what we will have available for you and what we'll be delivering for you, we are going to plan, facilitate, and host a parent and family leadership summit. This will be engaging with families who are currently using childcare systems here within the state of Michigan. We also are going to have a lot of technical assistance resources, which includes templates, which includes case studies for what has already been successful. We really don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. And fortunately, ECIC has a strong history of engaging with family leaders. And so we want to share that capacity with all of you. We also intend to help your coalition ensure that family voice that's included is authentic and that the parent leaders that you engage with understand their role and their part in helping to improve these systems in Michigan, both how it will positively impact their children, but also children in the future, because what we know about our kids is they keep getting older. We are going to, if you don't yet have connections with family leaders, we are fortunate throughout Michigan to have a lot of wonderful parent and family leaders who have young children, who are engaging with various types of childcare, whether it be home-based, friends or family, or center-based care. And so we're going to help facilitate those connections with you. We're going to help you retain those family leaders as part of your coalitions. And we're going to, in addition to providing leadership development opportunities for the families who are a part of your regional coalitions, we're going to help them connect with additional leadership opportunities that are within their areas of passion. So if it's families who are specifically interested in childcare and supports for children around speech, we're going to look for bespoke opportunities that they can continue to use their voice and connect with other organizations, other programs who are also doing this work, not only in Michigan, but across the nation.
Thank you, Sarah. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Kathy and Maria.
Thank you, Joan. Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Zenda Wilson. I'm co-executive director of Pulse at the WEF John Institute. As Joan said, we are an early childhood system building organization that focuses a lot of our efforts in Southwest Michigan, but also beyond, across the state and across the country. And our efforts are really designed to try and create sustainable systemic change, so that the things that we're doing, the energy we put into our efforts, are actually going to be here long beyond any programmatic response we might have. So how are we changing the regulations, mindsets, and things that we're doing with families and with our childcare business owners and employers and others that we've mentioned, so that this actually changes the landscape. And so it's with that we've been asked to partner with ECIC to really look at the role of employers specifically. And I'm going to go in a slightly different order here, because I want to start with our Child Care Champions event. So many of you may have participated in or been aware of the fact that we launched the inaugural Child Care Champions event this past 2024. It was in the fall, where we brought together, I believe, 12 award winners who are employers who are doing a lot to support their employees. And not only that, many of them are stepping up and really trying to support the sector as a whole through advocacy, through financial support, really looking innovatively at what role they can play in trying to change the course of where childcare is. And so it was wildly successful. We are coming off of that high and saying we need to do this every year. And in partnership with ECIC, we'll be doing that again this fall. We will be writing some case studies on our current childcare champions so that we can help other employers see what's possible. So look for those as an opportunity for us to be able to incentivize, motivate, and inspire other employers to get on board. And a role that our regional coalition leads and co-leads will be playing in this next year is to help us identify this year's winners. And so we'll be sending out some criteria later this year that we hope that will be informed, it will be informed by the current champions that we have right now. Our goal there is to also utilize that core group in the development of what we're going to be calling a family-friendly certification process. So what we've learned from employers is that they need a roadmap, right? So the Pulse roadmap was developed in response to their saying we need tools, right? We need to know what specifically we're going to be doing. Those tools are available with some technical assistance. That's going to expand through some other work at the state. But through that, there are some employers who are saying, I would love if I was certified. So there are things in our workforce space that, like, they do veteran-friendly certification process where you would go through what that employer is doing and then provide a certification that allows them to use that as an attraction tool for employees, but also to help others see what is possible, similar to the Champions event. So using the Pulse roadmap as the kind of the template for what family-friendly would look like. We're currently consulting with some HR folks and some employers that we have to really refine what this criteria is going to be for that certification. And that will be coming out probably Q2 of 2025. And we will be communicating a lot of that work with each of you. And so I'm going to turn it over to Maria, who's going to talk a little bit more about what that technical assistance with the regional coalitions is going to look like. Maria?
Yes, thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. I think we can keep saying that for the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping, because I just returned back to the office, so I'm going to use that. So Happy New Year. You know, one of the things that, as Kathy was sharing, we started this work in 2012. And I'd like to say that I started this systems change work in early childhood with probably a very small toolbox, right? That starter kit where you got one hammer and maybe a Phillips and maybe a flathead screwdriver. That's it. And what we have learned over these few years is we've built up our tool chest to really learn and understand how do we facilitate systems change in community with multiple partners. And that requires sort of learning from others and experiencing sort of the some of the knowledge that we've gained, sharing war stories. You know, there's some of this stuff that really what we have found have been successful for us in our work in Calhoun County is really leaning on each other as peer-to-peer learners. And so we want to create some technical assistance supports that really helps us to come together, learn from one another, share those tools that we've accumulated over the years, and really help to build your muscle around facilitating this work in your coalition. And so we'll participate in these monthly learning communities. We're going to hold a webinar specifically around TriShare and others that you might find, let us know that, as we start to meet and understand each other, what your needs are. We'll be one to, if we don't know, we know that there's someone else that does know, and we'll make sure that we connect you and weave you with those other additional partners. The other thing that we can share with you are those lessons, those efforts that are happening statewide and nationally around this issue. We are not the only ones facing this crisis. And so we want to learn from others, what they've learned and how we might be able to integrate some of that learning here within your community. So we will also offer individual consultation if that is something that you're interested in participating in. And we'll also, we'll be very flexible in making sure that we are serving you and your learning and building those muscles around facilitating systems change in community. What we found, folks may think they know what systems change is, and then when we get into it, it's really about clarifying what those expectations are, what's our North Star, and how we're going to work towards that. So Kathy and I are going to be at your disposal, and whatever you need as far as that technical assistance, we're going to be very responsive to that, and look forward to working with everyone around this issue, because we do firmly believe that our collective power will result in some transformational change in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Maria. And I'm going to turn it over now to Erin Watson.
Hey everyone, Erin Watson. I'm the owner of Weaving Change, and I'm an evaluator and consultant with a specialty in systems change, and especially systems change related to childcare. So I've worked with coalitions working on the same issues you all are working on across the country, and I'm just thrilled to be working with you all on this project. Got a question for you. How many of you have been in a situation where you don't have all the information you need when you need it to make important decisions about how to implement your work? For example, information about the current context, whether your strategies are starting to make a difference. It's frustrating, right? It's kind of like flying blind. And research tells us that systems change initiatives, just like the regional coalitions, are far more likely to succeed when they get timely, relevant, context-specific information about the progress of their efforts. And the good news is this project's evaluation is focused on just that, getting regional coalitions the information they need to make strategic decisions about implementation while they're doing the work, instead of only providing findings at the end of the project when that information just isn't as useful to inform decisions. So overall, the evaluation is focused on fostering real-time learning for continuous improvement, adaptation, ongoing innovation, not passing judgment. Think of the evaluation as a partner for success, not the Grim Reaper. So Misty, do you want to animate that first bullet point? So what will we be doing in more specifics? We'll be providing funded coalitions with information about the current state of the conditions that they're trying to change, those systems changes they're trying to make in your region to help advance some of those metrics Joan talked about a bit before. So I've read your great action plans. There's a range of systems changes y'all are trying to make within your regional systems. For example, policies, practices, zoning codes, and operations in different agencies and municipalities, employers, organizations. You're trying to change the goals driving regional organizations and elected officials. You're trying to increase the number of employers and childcare providers participating in childcare, TriShare. who's involved in your coalition and how they're working together, the engagement of parents and childcare providers and regional decision-making, the list goes on, right? And the evaluation is going to provide information about the current state of those things so that we focus on what are the changes you're trying to make in the first year and what information do you need to help guide your decision-making about the implementation you're working on. Second bullet point, Misty. As part of this, we'll be co-designing evaluation tools that coalitions can use to really understand the systems changes they're helping to bring about in the region. Specifically, tools that you can use to learn about initial wins and systems changes that you're starting to see and what's helping and hindering your progress. Finally, third, thank you. We'll be meeting individually with the leads and potentially co-leads from each coalition to talk about the changes and initial wins that you're starting to see, and explore ways to use what we're learning to guide decision-making about strategies and implementation. Again, we'll be doing this as we go instead of waiting until the end, so that information is even more useful to inform your decision-making.
Thank you so much, Erin. Again, we're going to take a pause here related to answering any questions that you might have on anything that we've talked about up until now, but most specifically, any questions that you might have about the strategic partnerships and the supports that they're going to provide. So, Misty, do we have any questions?
We do not have any open questions. We have a number of answered questions in the Q&A function, however, so there's some information on TriShare in there. Thanks, Diane, for asking that question. And then Erin asked about our intentions to fund one coalition per region. So I thought it might be a good opportunity to just talk a little bit more about that, Joan, if you have anything to add. I did answer it in written form so that everybody could see it as well. She
Yeah.
asks, is the intention to fund one coalition per region that covers all counties in that region? Some regions may be coming in with two separate coalitions from the first round of funding. Is it suggested that coalitions merge to serve all the counties in the region?
Yes, in answer to the last question, I think the vision of MyLeap in providing funding and saying that they want to see one coalition for each MEDC region is for regions that might have had the opportunity to have multiple coalitions during the planning period to come together and to respect and honor the work that might have been put forth in multiple action plans and to think carefully and collaboratively of what the priorities are for that region. This is a decision that the department made and the funding that they provided to ECIC. And so as the administrator, we're carrying that decision forward. And again, if folks want to talk further about that or might have questions or might want some ideas about how could we bring plans together, please schedule office hours with us during the application period, and you'll hear more about how to do that before too long here in this webinar.
Thanks, Joan, for adding on to that. And as a reminder, though I'm sure you saw it in the chat, please do feel free to enter any questions or wonderings you might have in the Q&A function. It will help us build out our FAQ document, which you'll be receiving post-webinar. Thanks.
I think we're turning it over to Andrea.
Yeah, hi everyone, welcome. An hour in, we're ready to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about our application and our application process. As a reminder, hi, I'm Andrea. I'm the program grants manager here at ECIC. I'm going to be very much on the back end with all of this stuff, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have while I'm talking through this. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to prepare your application in Flux. So a lot of you have been with us before, and this is a new system that we're using, this Flux management portal. And this is where our applications are going to be submitted. It's where we're going to be reviewing application. And this is going to be our new kind of one-stop shop in a way for a lot of our grants management stuff. So we'll be submitting SOEs through this portal. There might be some reporting components to it as well. So we have built out some materials for you to really understand how to use Flux, and then we're going to be covering it more as we go forward with you guys. The first thing I see, it's popped in the chat. We've put together a Flux how-to document, and so that really spells out how to register yourself within the Flux portal, and then how to log into that portal and really find the pertinent things that you're going to need for the application. I believe if Missy, you do have it pulled up, we could just kind of pan over to Flux. I can just show you guys a little bit what it looks like here. So after you register, it's going to come to us and then we're going to approve your registration. So you won't get a login immediately. There is going to be a buffer time that you're going to be waiting for us. But once you get that, that registration approval and you've got your password and your login information, this is what it's going to look like when you log in. And this is where you're going to apply for funding. Now you'll see on here that we have opportunities for both family childcare networks and regional childcare coalitions. This is just the way the system is set up. We needed to have both of them in there, even if you're only a part of one opportunity. And so as Misty's panning down on this first page, it just kind of tells you how to use the portal and different things. The one thing that I really just wanted to highlight before we go into the application is how to actually get to the application. And so you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a menu and it says apply for funding. It's pretty clear, but we do want to point it out because we've heard that it does cause some confusion in the past for people. And so you'll pick the project that you are a part of, Regional Childcare Coalitions, and you can also find the RFP here. It is on our website as well. But then you'll click the apply for funding and go through the application there. Missy, we certainly don't need to go through it here because we've got the questions built out on the slides, but I just did want to show everyone that this is how it's going to be. This is what it's going to look like, where you're going to plug things in. And I want to say to everyone live in this meeting, click save. It does not autosave. Hopefully autosave function comes through with Flux, but as it is right now, we want to definitely save things before it closes out. Flux is really good about not timing you out, so the window will stay open for quite a bit, but just if you're moving through things, please click save so you don't lose any of your content. And then we can go back to the slides and talk about a little more of the application stuff. Thanks, Misty. And so selection criteria for this application, we always want to spell that out for everyone. When we review applications, you'll see later when we talk about the questions that we give everything a point. We also provide a rubric for all of those questions so you can see how those points are assigned. The maximum score that you can get is 70 points. And then we've determined that applications with a score below 60 points will not be recommended. And as we've talked about before, that you know, these are all subject to approval by MyLeap, and we will be obviously in contact with you of how that approval process goes. Next slide. And so we're in to the application questions. I know we've been here for a long time, so I'm not going to get too deep into these, but I did want to go over them with everyone and show you what the rubrics look like, what the questions look like, how we're allocating points, and really provide you an opportunity to see these questions live and then consider any questions you might have now. You're always welcome later to ask questions, but this is just an opportunity for you to see them and be like, oh, actually, I would like to know more, and we can help you out right away. This is the first question. We saw this earlier with the region. So you're just going to select which region, and we don't assign points for more of our demographic questions, more of our yes or no questions. We don't assign points for those. The points are more for narrative questions and then those necessary uploads that you're going to have. And so we're going to talk about the leads and the co-leads that we talked about before. Joan had mentioned that these questions are here in the application that provides the opportunity for both leads and co-leads to answer and talk through these questions. So you can see here, thank you, Heather, for linking it in the chat. You can see here that we have no points for those sort of, you know, demographic E questions, right? So what organization serves as the lead, identify the status. Were they a lead for our former regional childcare planning grant opportunity? And then we start to get more into the narrative questions. So this is a 5 points possible question. What responsibilities did they carry in the work? And you can see our rubric here where full description, partial description, no description. Some of the rubrics are pretty simple, but I do want to have them here for some of them that will really spell out exactly what we are looking for in those questions. We can go to the next ones. And then it's the same questions here for the co-lead. Again, you're going to be answering these questions for whoever you're going to partner with. It is weighted, right, with points here for the co-lead. But if you can just speak to any of the responsibilities or any of the connections to any of these things here, that would be the section. We've got a question section answering your questions. I don't see any in the Q&A. I think we can keep moving. So prior experience. And so this is a pretty lengthy question. We do have character limits within the application. So I wanted to mention that, but you're going to see here, so describe the prior experience of the Regional Childcare Coalition lead and co-lead in planning and implementing all of these following strategies. So supporting the region's childcare business owners and nonprofits, increasing access to care, specifically infant and toddler, addressing the workforce gap, engaging parent and including parents, using convening power to bring people together in the region to really increase that access and capacity to childcare, engaging with employers to understand and address their childcare needs. So this is a heavy question, right? We've got it here for 5 points. We've got does not provide partial description and full description here. There are a couple of questions in this application that if you have supplemental materials that you want to add as an answer to this question, for instance, you have like a regional action plan or you have proof of something else and you want to kind of add that to beef up your answer, there is an area within the Flux application when you scroll down that you can add all kinds of documents as supplemental answers to these questions. So I wanted to highlight that here for you all. And then alignment with organizational mission and goals, another 5-point question. I think most of the questions are 5 points and it just depends on where they kind of fit within the sections. And this question just talks about aligning everything to your organizational mission and goals. We've got the rubric here. You can also find this information within the Flux portal, and then we've got the RFP built out that talks about a lot of these things as well. And then here's some more bigger narrative questions, right? So you're gonna see, or actually not narrative, upload questions. You're gonna see here that it's another kind of no points awarded. You're just gonna check and see if you're new or not. And then we're gonna talk about the membership roster. So what we want to see in the membership roster, we have a template provided that you are gonna upload, and there's a section in the application to upload. What we want to see is thanks, Misty. We want to see representation from every single one of the required members. So we're gonna be looking through that membership roster to see if you've selected each type of required member that you need, and we're gonna score it accordingly, or we're gonna reach out to you and ask you for more information if you can add further membership types to make sure you're hitting every single one of our required members. And then we're going to have a subsequent question that uses the information that you have added to this membership roster. So you want to make sure that if you're talking about partners later on in your narrative, that you have them here in the membership roster, because we're going to be cross-referencing these materials. Joan had a chart earlier that talked about the required members. You can see they're also listed here, right? So you're going to want, you know, economic development organizations, government, parents, childcare sector representation, ISD, TriShare, Great Start Collaborative, Great Start Director, and Great Start Family Liaison, and then the Great Start Quality Resource Center. So we want all of those in the membership roster. And then so this is the question that I was talking about, where we're going to cite that membership roster and we're going to really make sure that they align, because we're going to want you to talk about the strengths and needs in carrying out the required scope of work successfully of these members that you have listed. You're going to want to talk about their activities to date, any notable accomplishments, you know, the coalition's notable strengths and accomplishments. So we really kind of want to build out a well-rounded picture of who you have in your membership roster. So you're kind of listing, and then you're going to narrative their strengths. And then we've got room for questions here. I've got questions pulled up on the side here. So if you see me looking over, I'm just looking to see if anyone has anything. I don't think we do. Oh.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
So I think it must be incredibly clear. I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, we are over communicating. It is important to, we would rather over communicate than under communicate. It's important for us.
Absolutely.
And I hope everyone is moving around and stretching too throughout this. Let's see. So next question, question 15. You can see there's a lot of questions here. Describe how the Regional Child Care Coalition proposes to support the leadership and collaboration of parents of children from birth to age 12 and childcare business owners and providers as members of the coalition. You heard us talk about it earlier. This is such a huge component of this work, and we really want you to specify how these are going to happen. Question 16, another 5 points possible. You can see we're pretty consistent here. And this just kind of piggybacks off of the last question. So you're going to describe how partnering with parent leaders will add value and why it's so important to the success of this work in your region. And then the regional childcare industry. So you're going to describe the Regional Childcare Coalition's current understanding of the region's childcare industry and the role of the region's economic development organizations, the role that they will play in sustaining and expanding industry. So this is another one of those questions where you're really, if you have, your action plan, if you have documents that you want to upload that really help speak to this, it is required that you put in some narrative, but feel free to plug in there that also see this document on page X, 24 in this section. You can see that we have outlined, our understanding or any data that we've collected or anything like that to really spell that out. Then we're going to get into the project plan. We do project plans with all of our work. There's a required template that we have that you can download from the Flex portal, just like the membership roster. So you can download it, input your information, and plug it back in. So we've got within the project plan, it's got activities, deliverables, timelines. So be specific in your timelines. Thank you, Misty, for pulling that up. You can see here it's got the date, but so what we're really going to want to see you implement here is the key strategies, responsible parties, the timeline or deadline, and the outcomes. And in our experience, it is better to be more specific than not in these sections, especially with timelines and outcomes and things that are going to happen. And let's see. And then the next question is going to be more of a narrative where you talk about your project plan. So how does your project plan leverage the region's existing EDO network, right? So using that project plan and answering this question as well. So how are you leveraging for that? And you can see it's another 5-point possible question. Question 20, provide a rationale, including the data used to identify the proposed tasks, anything that you've referenced earlier in your application, as well for how the approach the coalition proposes in the project plan will, and then do all of these things. And we're really looking for details in this question. We really want you to hit on each of those, the ABC 1, 2, 3 here. We really want to understand how you're proposing to do this work and how it's outlined in the project plan and connected to the previous questions. More questions?
Still
It's a
no
lot.
questions, but I know it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to process. So as you all have more time to look through the RFP and even maybe possibly rewatch the content of this webinar, feel free to submit your questions to technicalassistance@ecicforkids.org, which we will place in the chat at some point throughout the webinar, and we'll talk more about the other resources you can use a little bit further toward the end of the webinar to have your questions answered. But feel free again to keep putting them in the Q&A as they pop up for you.
Thank you so much, Misty. So we just have a few more questions coming to the end here. So sustainability, we're looking for what your experience is in leveraging resources to support the implementation of your region's childcare action plan, and include examples. Again, we have the option to upload example documents here. And then I believe we have two more sections. This quality of personnel question is going to be the last points question of your application. So this, we're really looking for identifying all people that are proposed to work on this project, specifically within the organization, within the lead employees and independent consultants. And so we really want to look, it's kind of a staffing plan in a way. We really want to identify all individuals associated with the project and then the qualities and qualifications of each individual. And then this last section here, I'm going to hand it over to our Kelly Kreider, our Director of Grants and Compliance. He's going to be talking about our budget narrative, and the risk assessment. So these are three things: the budget and the budget narrative we will be uploading. The risk assessment is a link for you to fill out. These things are not scored as a part of the application process, but these are processed internally.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Kelly.
Andrea. So on the screen, we're going to show you just some basic information. We're not going to go through all the very detailed components today, but there will be a guidance document and some instructions as follow-up to support your completion of your budget. So the first tab is the budget summary. One of the key pieces here that we have found over the last several opportunities is that this can tend to get submitted without that top orange portion being completed. So I just want to call your attention to that. We do want to have record of your organizational name, some key contacts, and a few other things there. Everything else on the bottom section here will auto-populate based on information that is added to the budget detail tab. So we can take a peek at this. So this is the one of the two core sections of your budget development. The other piece will be the budget narrative. This is primarily the template where they'll give us a little bit of detail in column and then your corresponding budget. So each of the sections here, salaries, fringe, travel, are what we will call categories or line items. And then each of the individual lines are cost lines. So if you see those words referenced anywhere or as we talk about them, those are the couple of the components we're talking about. All of your budgets need to reflect direct costs for implementing the scope of work. And we will be looking in our review for expenses to be allowable, reasonable, and allocable per federal uniform guidance. If you do include any shared costs from within your organization, they must be of direct benefit to project implementation, or those are expenses you would capture under indirect. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Below, as Misty's scrolling through the sections here, I'll just highlight a couple of tips. Again, we'll provide some more specific guidance in writing. So as you get into your budget, you'll have that for reference. As we look at the salaries section, please be sure to list all roles that you intend to fund through this project, FTE, and the annual salary. If you don't have that role identified, a person hired yet, but it's okay to put to be hired. And in the narrative, you'll actually tell us who are filling each of those roles. So on the budget template here, you can just put role. On the narrative, you'll put more detail, including the actual who. There are a couple of examples in fringe here that you can see. There's different ways to reflect your fringe rates within your organization. Either is fine, they just should align with how you record that information in your general ledger. As we move down, travel is a section that we will review very carefully just to ensure that all of your travel plans align with your project plan and the scope of work, and that they also correspond with, again, those what's reasonable and allowable. If your organization does not have a travel policy, you'll need to refer to the Michigan Department of Technology Management and Budget, or DTMB, if you've heard of that, for allowable costs. And in your narrative, you'll describe the nature of the travel that's planned, including where, when, and reason, the number of people you're planning for traveling, and those rates. If you happen to have airfare, what's your budget number there? What are you basing your mileage off of? Lodging, so on and so forth. For general supplies, we do want you to separate your consumable supplies and your non-consumable supplies again. So you can see some examples here on the screen of, general office supplies, or your pens, your, markers, your presentation materials. Non-consumable supplies would those things that you're not consuming as they are used. Oftentimes we see some hardware or subscriptions, but those can also be reflected in miscellaneous, the subscriptions, not the hardware. For equipment, equipment is a very specific category under the federal regulations. And so we've got the definition here as anything with a per unit cost of $10,000 or more. So if you aren't planning to purchase anything of that dollar amount as again, a per unit cost, please do just note both on this budget template and on your narrative, no equipment will be purchased for this project. That just helps ensure that we've got it documented and eliminates questions as we're moving throughout the course of the project. Under contract services, I will note with all of these sections, if you need to add lines, please feel free to do so. We may need we will be double checking formulas to make sure all the numbers continue to carry into those, into the subline formulas, but we don't want you to feel limited to the number of lines that are just on the template. And I raise that for contract services, knowing that for this project, you may have multiple partners. You may have other contract services your organization uses. And so please do list each contract individually, unless they are something like trainers or speakers where they might not be identified yet and they're kind of a category. Otherwise, they should be broken out. Okay, and down in the next section, the miscellaneous or other section, this is really the catch-all, if you will. You can list anything here that isn't captured in the categories above. And so these are some examples of cost lines we've seen in other projects that might be relevant to your implementation. Some of these may not be relevant. You may have other items that are more applicable for your work here. I do want to call attention to the very last line. It's line 59 here, the participant support costs. Joan talked previously about how parent leader support will be an important aspect of this project. And so while this example says there's nothing budgeted in this sub-award, that's an area we will be looking for in your budgets. And there is a specific definition for participant support costs, and that includes any payments or supports you might make to parent leaders or childcare providers who are supporting implementation. And so that could be stipends, it might be travel allowances or travel reimbursements. If you are registering them for training or a professional development opportunity, anything of that nature where you are providing support, financial support for them to participate, it kind of gets lumped into this category. Now, for your purposes, if it's helpful to break those out in your narrative, certainly feel free to do that. But just know that for the budget, we will group them because it plays into the indirect. And so I'll talk really quickly about indirect. But again, more information will come in our follow-up document. What is indirect? Some of you may be very familiar with this concept. Some of you, it might be a new, you might be wondering, but essentially indirect are the expenses of doing business that are not easily identified or attributed to a particular grant, contract, or project, but really necessary for the general operation of the organization. Oftentimes we think of these as your executive level staff or your accounting staff. It might be cleaning services. There's really a broad range depending on what accounts your organization has or what expenses your organization incurs. Currently, the federal government has increased the allowable indirect rate, which is great for all of nonprofits or organizations that are, we know, already operating on pretty slim margins. And so the current de minimis rate, that's the default, is 15% of modified total direct costs. And so your finance folks may be familiar with that terminology. It essentially means there are costs that we cannot include or that we cap in that indirect rate. And so the formula, this indirect tab here is set up to do just that. So you don't have to figure out those formulas on your own or do that math. A couple of the key points here are any contract or subcontract that you have, indirect is capped at 50,000. So that section is broken out where you can see on the screen. And indirect, you cannot take indirect on participant support costs, and that's at the very bottom. So again, that's where we would capture those costs as a group and make sure that they are accurately recorded here. All right, so if we can maybe pop over and show the narrative just briefly. We'll be sending some instructions, but we also have an example for you.
It is loading on my end, so here we go.
No problem. Feel free to set your narrative up however it makes sense for your organization. You may have a template internally that you are comfortable with and that you use regularly. You may want to add it as a tab to your budget. It doesn't matter how you submit it, but we have learned that an example is so helpful to many of you. So you can also feel free to just use this and enter your own information. Just make sure it aligns with your budget. So both documents, it's very important that they align. We will be looking for that. And as we go through the review and feedback, again, both documents need to be updated together so that they remain consistent. So again, we'll do a section for each category or a category of the budget. So you'll group your information in the same way. Here you can see in this table, we do want to break down by role. So on the budget, it's okay if you want to put just the role and the other required information. You can feel free to include names as well, whatever's most helpful to you in the budget. But on the narrative here, we do want to see names, and that helps us track across multiple funding opportunities that we know we're talking about the same person if you have somebody who's in multiple opportunities with ECIC. And then we can just kind of scroll down so you can get a sense of how things are set up. Again, feel free to modify how you reflect the information as long as you're including at minimum the same level of detail. We will be looking for, in particular, how did you arrive at your budget number? This narrative is the place to do that. We don't need that detail replicated necessarily on the budget workbook, but we want to know, how did you arrive at that budget number? Is it a per FTE cost within your organization? Is it based on prior experiences? Do you have a quote already? So whatever level of information you can provide there will help us know that it's a reasonable cost. And so we won't have to follow up and ask that question after the fact. All right, I'll pause there and think we'll shift to quickly talk about the risk. Oh, gonna do some questions first, Misty? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about risk assessment, Kelly, if you want to review that really quickly, and then I can move on for questions. Does that sound good?
Great. So the risk assessment is a component of the application. It is linked within the Flux portal. So you'll, whereas the budget you'll upload, the risk assessment is a link. It is in Microsoft Forms, as you can see on the screen. And it's really set up as more of a survey or a questionnaire. We'll be looking for a completeness, and we do review all of the questions. And really, this helps us understand how you handle certain aspects of your organizational operations and finances. And if there's anything that we might need to follow up with you on, anything that we need to document internally for potential technical assistance later on, or individualized support. There are a couple of documents that you will be prompted to upload to Flux as part of your risk assessment, and those go in the organizational document section. And two things we'll be looking for are your organization's procurement policy, which will need to align with the federal uniform guidance, and your audited financial statements and single audit if you have it. So those are just a couple of pieces I want you to be aware of. We'll need to provide as part of that risk assessment. And I can pause there. Misty's showing where the documents are uploaded.
Yes, so this is the Flux portal and you all saw earlier. You will notice that there is a section at the very bottom called budget documents, where you'll find the things we just reviewed. Then the very, very last question, and this goes both for Family Childcare Networks if you all plan to also take a peek at that application at any point. And it looks the exact same for this application. So you'll notice this in the regional planning, that the last question has the link that was just placed in the chat, and that there are some additional sections where you can upload those documents that Kelly was just speaking about. Just wanted to point that out to clarify, and then I want to open it up for questions. I see Annette has submitted a couple of questions. First one reads, mentioned character limits on questions. Do you happen to know what the character limits are, and or does it say within Flux for each question before you answer it? Andrea.
Yeah, I can totally answer this. This is a great question. Yes. So the character limits are 2,500 character limits, and that includes spaces and punctuation. So it's not words, it's like it's actual little whatever you have. And in the Flux application, we have it set up so it's going to tell you how many characters you have remaining, so you can keep track of that.
Awesome, thank you. And then also, Annette asks, if we've already submitted the risk assessment for other funding through ECIC, do we need to resubmit for this opportunity?
Great question, Annette. Thank you for asking that. And I just want to double check with my colleagues to make sure in the Flux portal, it's just the link, and so there isn't a requirement. Okay, great. So then with that, if you have recently and as within the last quarter, I'll say, submitted a risk assessment for another opportunity, as long as nothing has changed, then we don't need to resubmit that. We might want to think about where to document that in the Flux portal, just as an acknowledgement that it has been submitted, so that we know to go find that as we have multiple opportunities happening. But I will encourage you, even if you have submitted a risk assessment for a prior opportunity, to still click on the link for this if you are pursuing this opportunity, to make sure the questions, all responses would remain the same. All of the questions are pretty much the same. I think there were some minor tweaks, but it's best practice to ensure that your answers haven't changed at all.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering those questions. We might have one more that just popped. Oh, Annette says thank you. Thanks, Annette, for asking. A great one to add to the FAQ. So I have noted that. All right, moving right along. And I have the privilege of talking all things application review and selection. So you're probably wondering, what does that process look like? How does ECIC work when it comes to application review and selection? So we have and engage a 4-step review process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those steps so you know where your application will be in each step. So first, we receive all applications to assure that they meet minimum qualifications. So it's that very basic first level review that we do internally as the Innovation Fund and with our compliance partners to make sure that all of the requirements of the application have been submitted with the application. So we're looking for attachments that are required. We're looking for the risk assessment is complete. We're looking for every narrative every narrative question has a response that has been submitted associated with the question that is relevant and not just something like test or whole placeholder text. So it's very high level review. It helps us understand if you might need to be reached out to request some more information. So that's first, minimum qualifications review. Next, once the application makes it past review of minimum qualifications, where we also look for eligibility. So in the event that the applicant is not eligible, AKA not a EDO lead or co-lead, we would weed those applications out. Those that make it through go to step 2A, where we send each application for individual review and scoring. So we collect a group, and we're very happy with our training of that group, and I'll get into that. We collect a group of individual reviewers, and they are assigned various applications for review, and they will score individually before the next step, which is small group consensus. So those individual reviewers who have reviewed the same applications come together to reach consensus on their scoring. So they talk through each response from each application and the associated score and the rubric, and they all agree. And then a final score is created from that small group consensus review. After that final scoring has happened for all applications and all individual reviewers have met as small groups and come to consensus, ECIC works to compile a list of applications to recommend for funding, which we then provide to MyLeap, which is step 4, who then reviews and approves that final list. So as I mentioned earlier, we take a lot of care and consideration in how we center equity in our review. And Courtney talked about it much earlier in this webinar about our priorities on the Innovation Fund and centering equity throughout all we do. And that includes in our application review and selection process. So these first 3 blue boxes and the first purple blue box happen all before we even start scoring applications. That includes all reviewers completing and signing conflict of interest forms prior to getting assigned applications. That way our team knows where applications should and should not go. We even complete conflict of interest forms ourselves to make sure that we are maintaining equitable grant review. Then we train all of the folks who have been recruited as reviewers. We train them on how to score with the rubrics. We go through examples, we answer questions. We then also have integrated a conflict of interest acknowledgement within the application scoring portal for the instance where someone might have forgot to put something on their conflict of interest form and they receive an application and they say, uh-oh, I actually can't review this one and I might have forgotten to mention it. So they are required to acknowledge within the scoring portal that they are that they're free to move on, that they don't have a conflict of interest with that particular application. The other thing we do in that training process is we provide educational resources on identifying and addressing biases that might come up in review. We provide these virtual resources that we provide to every single reviewer and encourage them to review. We also engaged in those materials together during the training process. Next, in this middle purple box here, we engage that multi-step review process that I just talked with you all about. We have multiple reviewers scoring the same applications. That, along with our small group consensus scoring, helps us identify those divergent scores. Sometimes that happens, but because of all the steps we take, we're able to mitigate that and address it appropriately. And then lastly, as you all have seen today on our webinar and as shown within the RFP, we publish our rubrics with all of our scoring criteria included. And those are the things that are used across review teams. We also train on those rubrics. So there are no secrets, you know, exactly what everything or how everything is scored and what you could potentially score with each response. All right, and we've talked about this page throughout the whole entire webinar. How can you find more assistance for submitting a successful application? Of course, as we've talked about and has been posted in the chat, we have the RFP document that has all of the information you saw today and even more in it. Please do use that as your first resource. It is very helpful, and we hope it is incredibly clear. As I've mentioned, both at our question pit stops and within the chat, we are developing and already have a pretty developed FAQ document. We're using the questions that you all have asked today to further develop and inform that document. We will be posting that document on our website, where you can also find the RFP, where you will also find the link to this recording and the slides associated with this webinar, which you can see I have listed as another bullet point here, recorded applicant webinar and the slides. And then lastly, that Flux how-to document that was shared in the chat as well. We tried to get very specific in there to help you really understand the step-by-step process it takes to access Flux and submit a successful application. If all of those things are not answering your question, which is very, very likely possible, please do always reach out to us via email at technicalassistance@ecicforkids.org, which we will drop in the chat. This is where you would come to ask us questions you cannot find the answers to and to request office hours, which is the next option for assistance. We are starting office hours appointments tomorrow, and they will run from tomorrow through January 30th, which is the day before the application closes. You have to email us at technicalassistance@ecicforkids.org to request a link to our office hours appointments. We will send that to you for scheduling, and then you will be able to choose that time and date that works best for you, and it helps save us a lot of back and forth, and hopefully it makes it easy on you to get a time slot with us. Those time slots are 15 minutes. Unless you reach out and you might need some more time, we can always make space for more time if it's a more comprehensive question or a more complicated question that you might need some additional time to dive into with us. So of course, like I said, reach out anytime for that information. And lastly, another place to gather some more information, should you be interested, is our upcoming Regional Childcare Planning Report Release webinar, where we'll be talking all things about a really exciting report that has just been released. I want to turn it over to Joan if there's more context you want to give about the report release webinar. If not, that's okay. Just know it's January 15th from 1 to 2. And Joan, any other information about that webinar?
I think particularly if you haven't been very involved in the prior work under Caring for My Future, it would be incredibly helpful to attend the webinar and hear from MyLeap, ECIC Child Care Innovation Fund, and the Policy Equity Group about what we found in the work we did together with economic development organizations and coalitions across the state, because we'd love to see that built into your application responses.
Thank you, Joan. Really appreciate that. And I want to again give an opportunity for folks to enter some questions into the Q&A should there be anything we left unanswered. All right. Barbara inquires, would you be able to release who is on this call for opportunity for collaboration? Joan, I'll turn it over to you. I see you've come off mute.
Yeah. I think the problem we have is that we don't have people's permission to necessarily do that, Barbara. So what I would suggest is maybe scheduling a quick office hours and we could chat with you and let you know kind of specifically kind of what are you looking for? At least we could say like, yes, there was a person from these counties on this call. So that'd probably be the best way to handle that.
Thanks, Joan. Other questions before we move on here? Okay, if not, we are going to close out the webinar. I'll allow Joan to kind of give us the farewell.
Just want to thank everyone for your interest in this opportunity and really encourage you to make an office hours appointment. It's helpful for us to get to know who's interested in applying, what you're thinking about, what your questions are. And good luck to everyone. And we look forward to the opportunity to work with all of you on this very important initiative.